Hello, everyone, and welcome to PLM Talks. I'm here with Philip Fracassi. I definitely asked how to pronounce that last name, and I just want to confirm I said that correctly, right, Philip?
Yeah, you nailed it. Perfect.
Yay! So we are here to discuss writing and his upcoming book, which is coming out next year. You actually have one coming out sooner, which I will get into soon. But we will be discussing Gothic. But let me introduce him. Philip Fracassi is the author of the award-winning story collection Behold the Void, which won Best Collection of the Year from both This Is Horror and Strange Eons magazine. His new collection, Beneath a Pale Sky, was released by Leith Press. I should have asked how to pronounce that too.
I think it's Lethe,
Lethe. Would not have guessed that.
like the river. Like it's like a river in hell, I believe.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
In July 2021, his debut novel, Boys in the Valley, was published on Halloween 2021 by Earthling Press. His short stories have been published in numerous magazines and anthologies, including Best Horror of the Year, Nightmare Magazine, Black Static, Dark Discovery, Cemetery Dance, and others. And his newest book will be coming out on September 27th of this year, called A Child Alone with Strangers. But you're not just talented with writing, you also have your own podcast called The Dark Word, and you do screenplays as well. So it's just a huge resume, daunting, intimidating. But thank you for joining me.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
So let's get down to the writing questions, because obviously you have quite the resume of publication. So I'm sure a lot of people are always, I'm sure this is a question you get a lot. Like, what is your writing process like?
Yeah. So my writing process is kind of different day by day, unfortunately. I do write, I am writing full time now, which is nice. I was able to start writing full time about a year ago. Hopefully I'll continue to be able to write full time. So we'll have to see. But I do have like, it is my job. And when I say it changes day to day, what I mean by that is depending on the project. If I'm into a novel, I'm usually writing 8 to 10 hours a day, like actually writing. Sometimes when I'm not writing a novel or I don't have a deadline and I have a lot of things coming out, kind of like now, I spend a lot of my time doing promotional stuff. And trying to get interviews like this one and working to get the book out there. And it varies. And like right now I have a screenplay I have to write. It really depends on my workload, but I try to write a little bit every day, usually at least 500,000 words on a new story, or even if I'm just writing out ideas or editing something. That's the other thing, is a lot of times, I have like 3 novels coming out in the next like 12 months. So I'm kind of proofing and editing all those novels, which is a much bigger task than I think people realize. It's a lot of work, and it's very time consuming. So kind of a little bit different every day, but I try to be at my desk. I'm trying to, working one way or another, usually 10 hours or so a day. I usually start in the morning. I usually take a break for lunch. And then I work a few hours in the afternoon. Then I take a break for dinner or whatever, see my family, and then I usually work late at night as well. So I kind of do like shifts, but I'm usually here like around 10 hours a day working.
Okay, then drilling down with that, are you somebody who meticulously plans? Are you what they call a pantser? Do you set up like mood boards? Do you like music or silence or white noise? Like, what kind of environment do you need?
Well, this is my office, so you can sort of see the it's not very tidy, but uh, I don't do any sort of mood boards. I shouldn't say that. I guess I do a version of mood boards. For when I write, it's really different. So if I'm writing a short story, um, I usually sit down and or open like a Word document, and I just like type, 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 type. I just kind of write the whole story in very sparse you know uh prose. I just kind of write the whole, like, the plot, like beat for beat. Here's what happens, and this, and this, and this. And then I usually print that out, and I have like a kind of a guide, and then I usually just start writing. Um, a lot of times with the short story, the hardest part for me is figuring out how to start the story. Um, where do I want to drop that pin, as along the storyline, and who do I start with, and what's the voice of the story? Some of my stories are more pulpy, some of my stories are more prosy, some of my stories are, like they're different. So the tone is something I set early on. With novels, I do extensive outlining, so not a pantser at all. I have a Scrivener, and in Scrivener I outline every single chapter. Um, so I have there's a list this long of every single chapter in the novel, usually broken into sections that I have in my own head. And I do, to the mood board question, I usually pull images of things off the internet, like this is the house that Jimmy lives in, this is the school that he goes to, this is the car that so and so drives, this is what so and so might look like. So I do, and I put all that in Scrivener. There's like a storage place there where you can put images and stuff like that, maps, whatever you want, web links. So that's why I like it. I like to have all my stuff in one place. And then I just open up Word and I just write. Once I have that outline done. And so, but as far as the atmosphere is concerned, I definitely listen to music. I can't listen to anything with words in it. I know a lot of writers can, but I can't. It's very distracting for me. I get very much in a zone. So, sort of ambient stuff. I listen to a lot of like soundtracks. I listen to a lot of classical music. Sometimes if I'm writing something, I might listen to the same soundtrack throughout the whole process. For my novel, Boys in the Valley, I was listening to the Dunkirk soundtrack, and I listened to the Dunkirk soundtrack every time I sat down to write that novel. So I like having a bit of, and it's consistency, but it's also, that's what gets my mind in the right place for whatever reason. And different stories have different soundtracks in my head. And sometimes they have to be a little more aggressive, or sometimes a little more eclectic. It could be more Philip Fracassi, or it could be more, Evil Dead soundtrack. So it kind of depends. But yeah, so that's kind of what I do, and then yeah, and then I go 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 go.
That's fair. So then where do you get the ideas for your stories?
Um, most of the time they just pop into my head. There's really no, structure to it. A lot of times I'll dream a story. Uh, the subconscious mind is a wonderful, library of ideas. Um, I do most of my mental writing in the morning, and when I'm going to sleep, and when I'm waking up, so I'm in that kind of lucid dream state. So I can sort of like, even if I know I'm kind of half awake, I just like let myself lay there and think for a while. Um, and I tend to come up with some pretty good ideas doing that. A lot of times I'll just, like I said, it just pops into my head. I wrote a story called Alter, which takes place at a swimming pool, and it's a very horrible story. But that was an idea where I was literally, sitting next to a swimming pool, and I was kind of like, what if this happened? That'd be horrible. And that's what I wrote about. And then usually it kind of expands on its own. Once I had that kind of acorn of an idea, the characters sort of filled themselves in. And once the characters are there, the story kind of takes on a life of its own. So, but yeah, the ideas just kind of happened. I will say, I think it was, I can't remember what writer was mentioning this the other day on Facebook, but I agree 100%. And they were talking about traveling. They were just like, you got to get out, you got to see things. And I don't travel a lot. I don't like to leave my house. But I'm a smidge agoraphobic. But I do agree with that. I think the more you expose yourself to, the more ideas you will generate. And always just be asking yourself the same, the question, what if? What if, if you're looking at a building, what if that building came down, and someone was trapped inside? What would that be like? So that's kind of how most of my stories are generated.
I definitely understand that. That's something I do as well. Or, you're just out and about and you get a weird idea and you just keep thinking about it over and over and like experimenting with it. I
Yeah.
guess then, since we're kind of similar in that way, but do you carry like a journal around or do you trust yourself to remember it?
There is no worse feeling in the world than having a great idea and then getting distracted by something life-y and then forgetting the great idea. Um, that's happened to me a few times. I do not keep a journal of ideas. Typically, when I have an idea, I do try and I do try and type it out very quickly. I have a whole desktop folder that just says ideas, and there's about 300 little ideas in there. And But I don't keep a journal. I do keep a notepad by my bed. So if I wake up in the middle of the night and I have an idea, or if I'm working on something and I have an idea for that story that maybe I was kind of stuck on or whatever, I'll have something I can write it down very quickly, which is always really funny in the morning to see what I wrote down and how, it's usually like, I can barely read it because I'm usually just scribbling in the dark. But I do keep that notebook by my bed, and then other than that, I'll if I'm out and I have an idea, if I'm not where I can get to my desk, I just email myself. So I do that a lot. So I have I have a lot of emails for myself that I keep in a little subfolder called ideas. So that's mainly it's kind of the same thing as a journal, I guess, but it's just I just don't want to forget stuff. So that's how I usually keep track.
Okay, now this one's a tough one. But I feel like a lot of writing advice is like find your voice or something similar. So I guess I this question is based on that idea, but what do you feel helps your writing stand out in particular? Because
I
obviously you're
know,
very successful. Like your resume is huge. So what do you think like is the ingredient to that success in your case?
I don't know. It's a great question, and I've thought about it, and I haven't thought like, boy, why am I so successful? That thought has never entered my head, but I do wonder. I'm always so appreciative when someone picks up one of my books or reads one of my stories, and it's always a surprise to me to get like to see somebody post about a book or a story, and I'm like, wow, somebody actually read that, and it's always a nice surprise. It never is not a nice surprise. So, but I do think like about because I've heard people say, they've commented that I have a unique writing voice, and that whereas I don't know what that would be. I don't think about it. It's certainly not something I apply. It's just I guess it's just I just write what sounds good to me, and and I guess it's unique. And I even try to write. I always try and do something different. And I'm the kind of writer who I get bored very quickly with myself. So I like to play with uh, different, what I, in my mind, are different voices or different ways of writing a story. Like I said at the head, I think sometimes my stories are pulpy, sometimes they're more serious, sometimes they're more prosy, and I do that on purpose. And with my novels, it's kind of the same way. I like my novels to be very unique. I like them all to be different. I've written, I don't have any novels currently out, but I have, I think, four coming out in the next year. Um, so all of them are dramatically different. Don't Let Them Get You Down is coming out from Zagava Press, and that's not genre. That's it's a book about anxiety and depression. And then A Child Alone with Strangers is kind of a big doorstop, old school kind of crime thriller horror hybrid. Gothic is a definitely just straight down the middle horror novel, and Boys in the Valley, which is coming out next summer from Nightfire and Orbit, um, respectively, is a little more. I think of it as more quiet horror. It's more serious than like say Gothic, which definitely has some tongue in cheek moments to it. So I try to keep myself entertained, and if I'm entertained, then the hope is that the reader is entertained.
Okay, then what advice would you give to aspiring or current writers that you wish you had received when you had started?
Well, I go into a lot of this. That you mentioned my podcast, The Dark Word. That's one of the questions I always ask the writers and editors that I have on as guests. But so it's a really good question, and I think for me, it's not so much what advice do I wish I had gotten. It's really what advice do I wish I had followed. So, but the advice I had gotten early on was that there will be a lot of uh, hills and valleys in a writing career, and you have to weather all of them, and you can't take you can't take the bad stuff too hard, and you can't take the good stuff too well, because it's just, you got to kind of try and keep yourself level, and stay persistent. And and I was really, I when I started writing, I was really, I didn't have a lot of success, for a few years, and it got me really bummed out, and it was very hard for me to keep going, and because I was like, I didn't really see the point of it, and but my friend, was a writer, Laird Barron. He was very helpful, and he kept telling me, like, dude, just weather it. You're good. Keep going, keep going, keep going. And I did. And now things are all sort of, coming together. Things are going very well. But I know in my head that 2 years from now, I could be hitting another valley. So I'm not really like, oh my God, this is so great. Everything is so great. I'm really like, okay, this is all excellent. I'm very happy with the way things are going, but I have to keep writing, because if I don't keep writing, if I don't keep grinding, if I don't keep working, I'm going to run in, I'm going to drop down into one of those valleys. And so that's my advice, is always just keep your nose down, work hard, and good stuff will happen. And that's, you can't let yourself get crushed because of a rejection and just be like, oh, and throw the keyboard out the window and whatever. You have to just put it out of your head. I called it, put blinders on, you know, like I said, keep your nose down and just write, write, write. And that's, people, like, often, a lot of comments I get are like, oh, you're so prolific. You have all this stuff coming out. And I'm like, all I do is write. And I've been writing for 7 years. My first publication was 2015. And, and I just keep going, even if I don't know what's going to happen, even if I don't have a place for a story, or even if I don't even think, sometimes I write stories I don't even think I'm going to submit. I wrote a story recently. It's an 11,000 word story, and I know nobody will buy it, but I wanted to write it, so I wrote it. And so that's what advice I would give, and I wish I had followed more. Is just keep yourself emotionally level, ride out the bad times, and keep working hard, and good times will come. I mean, you will break through if you work hard and keep at it.
Yeah, that's something I've definitely seen or witnessed with newer writers or those who have just started submitting. It's like the first few rejections can sometimes hit them really hard, and then they start to question whether there's a point. And
Right.
like obviously, like I remember my first few rejections, I'm sure you do, but it's true. Like you just kind of have to like put that aside and just keep going. I mean, if you let those rejections hamper your spirit, like you aren't going to succeed. You kind of just have to bull rush through.
Yeah, I mean, you have to be really thick-skinned, and which is a difficult thing, especially with writers who are generally sensitive people. And you have to be really thick-skinned, because not only you're going to get rejected, but you're going to get those one-star reviews, and you're going to get people leaving you mean-spirited, sarcastic, to reviews to something that you worked on for months and months and months, that you poured your heart and soul into. And it's hard not to take that in a bad way, but the reality is you can't, and you just have to move on, and realize that not everybody is going to like your work, and not every editor is going to buy your work, and all that means is you got to work harder, and you got to get your work to more people, and you'll find your readership, and you'll find those editors that connect with what you're doing. I think a great example is Eric LaRocca, who's kind of blown up, blown up in the last year, and he writes pretty, hardcore stuff. And he talks about he posted the other day about how he had so many rejections and so many rejections, and nobody would is because people weren't connecting with his work because it was too intense or too hardcore, as it were. And but now he's blowing up, and he found his audience, and he connected with people who bought his work. So anyway, so I think you just got to keep adding, and it goes back to your voice a little bit too, is do what you do. Don't try and do what somebody else does. Do what you do, and eventually you'll find you'll find that person or that group of people that want to read what you're doing.
So you heard it here, folks. Philip says, Kool-Aid man your way into the writing industry. Just bust through that wall, screaming, sloshing Kool-Aid everywhere.
Yeah,
Kool-Aid.
because yeah, you got to be the Kool-Aid man because yeah, because look, it's a rough road. You got to really want it. You got to really love it, and it's not. I mean, between agents and reviewers and readers and editors, all these people who are going to be rejecting you and telling you that you're no good, but there will also be people who will tell you that they love what you're doing and to keep going. So listen to the positive, but it's at the end of the day, it's about work. In my mind, at the end of the day, it's about working hard, creating the things that you want to create, and eventually you'll find an audience.
Okay, so let's jump into a specific book then, Gothic. It's coming out next year, but you can get it for pre-order right now. The link will be in the description below. I got a digital ARC, so I don't have a physical book to hold up, but I will put a picture of the cover here in my post
Nice,
editing. Ooh, beautiful. Wow.
cool. I can't wait to
So
see it.
Gothic, yes, up for pre-order, coming out next year. Why don't you tell us a little about the novel and what it's about? Keeping it as spoiler-free as possible, of course.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a spoiler. It's yeah, it's not a too spoilery novel. It's yeah. So Gothic is about a haunted desk, and it's if when I was writing Gothic, I was envisioning it as a Sam Raimi movie. So it's written in that kind of style, which mean point being is it's fun. I just wanted to write a really fun old school horror novel. And it's about a guy named Tyson Parks who is an aging horror writer whose best years are quote unquote behind him. He had a bunch of bestsellers in the 80s and 90s, and now he's kind of washed up um, and he's sort of struggling and he's broke and all this other stuff. And he gets a desk as a present from his partner, and he finds new life, as it were. The desk and him bond, connect, and then he eventually has to kind of obviously a lot of bad things happen. You know, the you know the positivity is connected to with a price, and um, and he has to make some hard decisions while not in the best mental state as he kind of deteriorates. Um, so that's basically the nutshell of what Gothic is about. And I think it's a lot of I tried to make it just like a lot of fun, and I wanted it to be kind of like kind of one of those old school horror paperback novels you'd buy, the little Ace novels or whatever, and just burn through on an afternoon and enjoy yourself.
And what inspired you to write this book? Specifically, it like obviously deals with a male writer who is the main character. So do you see a lot of yourself in the character besides the washed up part? Because obviously you're doing well.
No, I don't see myself at all in this character. No, he's sort of I kind of think of him as an angry Stephen King. If Stephen King were a bitter, angry man, he would sort of be Tyson Parks-esque. So, and I don't know, honestly, I don't know if I can tell you what inspired the story. I first wrote this story as a novella, and that was about 4 years ago. And and my agent at the time, my first agent, she read it and she was like, "Dude, this has got to be a novel." And so I kind of went back to the drawing board a little bit and I kind of restructured it and wrote it out as a novel, kind of adding some different things that weren't in the original novella. So I don't know exactly where I got the haunted desk idea from. It just kind of hit me. I do think there was a moment when I was thinking about Stephen King and I was thinking about some of his short stories, and I was thinking how he likes to take very common objects and make them monstrous. Everything from Christine to a short story, The Mangler, to you could go on and on with it's a recurring theme with some of his work. So I think I liked the idea of that, taking something that was very like common and making it into a monster and into this monstrous entity. And and I think I kind of came up with a desk. And so yeah, so that was kind of I think how it first got into my head.
And so this started as a novella and then you expanded it into a novel. Was there a certain part of this book that was like really hard for you to write, like maybe a difficult section or a place you just struggled, or maybe just the transformation from a shorter novella format to a longer novel?
Yeah, being totally transparent, I I wrote this novel. I sent it to my agent, my current agent, uh, and I think it was her who first said, "You need to work on your women characters," and and it was a very important note for me to get, because one of the critiques I get a lot more than I'm comfortable with is I do get the occasional, you know, misogynist comment thrown about my work and about me, um, because in some of my stories, women are killed horribly but a lot of men are killed horribly. I kill everyone equally in my head, but when I wrote this book, I got a little bit of a wake up call on essentially you need to write your women better. You need to write women more fully. You need to make them more three-dimensional. You need to give them more agency. You basically just need to write them better than I was doing. And I worked really hard on that element of not just for that book, but in general. Because I'm just being honest. I'm a guy. Sometimes you just don't what you don't know is hard to write, and I had to learn that lesson early on, and I've applied it to everything I've written since, and I was really happy to apply it. And my wife, God bless her, I told her, I said, "Hey, read this for me, and tell me what I could do better about these characters." And we had many long talks about it, and anyway, so that was something that was that I learned writing this book, and I went back and I rewrote entire sections, so that the I in my the best of my ability, and also asking women to read it. I tried my best to make those other characters, which are sort of quote unquote B characters. Tyson is kind of the main character of the story, but I wanted to make sure that they were well-rounded characters, that they had agency, that I wasn't being flippant about their personalities or what happens to them in the book. So that was for me was something, I guess, it was difficult in a way, but it was also something that I learned writing this particular book, and it's something I try my best to apply to all my stuff. And it was a little disappointing because I did get one NetGalley review where they were saying how they thought that women were two-dimensional, and I was like, man, I really tried. I really tried hard, but sometimes it's just no pleasing everybody. But yeah, so that would be the one thing about this book that I took away as a lesson.
That's fair. I guess then sticking with that point, did you say you asked your wife to read it? Did you also have like sensitivity readers? Because I know that's a thing that's now in the industry to have people read it. Um,
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the sensitivity reader idea. I get it. Um, I understand why people do it. I understand the whole trigger warning thing. Um, I get it. I'm not personally, and this book particularly kind of, you know, in a way, this book is sort of the anti-PC book. I kind of the character obviously he makes fun of that kind of stuff at different. I think at one point in the book they have a conversation about it with his publisher. Um, I think if I were to write something, like if I were to write a character who like you said, like a woman, or if I were, or someone who had a different race, or different if you know, gender, whatever, I would reach out to somebody to read for me to make sure that I was being sensitive to that uh person, that character. Um, but as far as like um the actions of the story, as far as what happens in the story, not the characters themselves, um, I kind of just like it is what it is. And I'm kind of unapologetic about it. And it's like if you don't want to read it or if it makes you uncomfortable, I'm sorry, but you don't have to, you don't have to read it. But that being said, I'm also not an extreme horror writer. If I was writing, you know, something that I felt was particularly nasty or particularly could be particularly triggering, or because it's so graphic and it kind of goes on for a long time, or it's repeated throughout the book, or whatever the case might be, then I think I might consider something like that. But for the most part, my stories are they're kind of just like thrillers. They're more, horror is there, the violence is there, and that kind of stuff. But for the most part, I don't really get. I don't think I get very graphic. Um, with my work. But even so, I've had stories where I insinuate that there is like a sexual assault, for example, and I don't actually describe it, but I it but it happens just by the way I write the story. But I don't actually talk. There's not a single word about what actually happened. Uh, it's all kind
So
of
kind
behind
of
closed.
like off screen.
It's all exactly. I was about to say that. Yes, basically it's off camera, and but I've gotten a ton of blowback for stuff like that, and I'm like, I don't know, I don't even. For me, it's kind of I don't really get it, and maybe that's my fault because I'm like I didn't even tell you like I didn't even describe anything. There's no graphics, page of like of this kind of horrible thing happening. So sometimes people I think just want to be upset, and you just got to let them be upset, and they're just going to be upset. Like I said, I think there's going to be people who are going to be upset no matter what you do and no matter what you write. There's always going to be a handful of people that are, for whatever reason, that are upset with you or upset with the story or upset with something you did. Because if you've ever been on Twitter, you you know that people sometimes just want to be upset, and there's no rational reason for a lot of it, and you just kind of like roll with it or blow it off because there's nothing you can do.
So it sounds like a good takeaway from this is, part of having thick skin, you're going to get the critiques from strangers, from NetGalley, from Twitter, from Goodreads, and take that with a grain of salt. But if somebody you trust, like in this case, your agent, offers a critique, like in this case, it was, hey, like maybe your female characters could use a bit more rounding, a bit more development, then that's the critique that you want to take to heart and really start to work on versus anonymous critique that may come from, the critique sites like Goodreads that may just be thrown up there.
Yeah,
Um,
I think so. I think I definitely you always want to listen to your agent. You might not agree with them, but you want to listen to them, and you want to listen to people you respect, like you said. Like if a writer that you respect or a reader that you respect their opinion, and they say, then yeah, you should. I listen to everything, and I do listen to the reviews, and I just don't always agree with them. But if I get like if somebody says if I get 20 reviews that all say the same thing, in a negative way or whatever, then I'm gonna take another look at that element because that's like a wide sample. But I also have reviews. I got a 1-star review for one of my books, and the review was not a good movie. So you know what I mean. So I think if you start trying to take everybody's advice that you read about on Goodreads and whatever, you're going to go crazy. And I will say this: it's a writing thing is that if you have beta readers or you have people reading your book, that's another thing to keep in mind is you don't have to listen to everyone's advice, listen to everyone's feedback, but don't agree with everyone's feedback. It's ultimately your book, it's your art, and it's got to be what you want as a writer. But and sometimes that advice can lead to other things. But everyone's going to have a different take because everybody's unique because art is subjective. So everyone's going to have something they're gonna have one person's favorite story in a collection is going to be another person's least favorite story. That is, if you go on my Goodreads page, you can see that in real time. Um, so you can't listen to everybody because you can't please everybody. It's like if you write a song, not every single person in the world is going to like that song, but a lot of people will, and a lot of people won't. And it's the same thing with writing. It's art. It's like a painting. Not everyone's going to love it. So you have to write for yourself, and then just do your best to try and get it to readers who will appreciate it. And the ones who don't appreciate it can go read somebody else. There's a lot of writers out there.
So be open to feedback, but protect your writer's voice.
Exactly.
Well, this got heavy, so why don't we talk about your favorite part to write in this book?
I loved writing the crazier stuff. There's this, I don't want it to be a bit of a spoiler, but there's a couple scenes that are really weird, and that was a lot of fun for me to write. There's a couple scenes that are, where the desk is doing its thing and kind of becoming, becoming this monster in the house, and I liked writing some of those kind of like more insane scenes of sort of like violence and horror. That's the fun stuff for me. And but I can't really specify which scene because I think all the scenes I'm referring to would be a little spoilery. So I would want people to. But there's a scene with a baby that I really loved writing that you can probably remember because you read the book. So and there's a scene with a desk with one of the drawers that I thought was really fun to write as well. You probably remember that scene.
Yeah, that scene particularly stuck out to me.
Right. So that those were the fun parts of the funner parts for me of writing the book. But I really loved writing that novel. It was I think the other thing that was a little hard, getting back to your earlier question, was I think it's some of it's historical. There are elements of it that are historical, and I was very careful about those sections. I wanted them to be historically accurate. So so that was a little bit more of a that was a little more of a grind for me. But whereas all the kind of modern day horror stuff was more just fun. Yeah.
Yeah, so with the main character being a writer, a Stephen King-esque 80s superstar, in the beginning of the novel, and a large theme throughout is him dealing with his writer's block, which of course is what makes the disc so tempting because it offers it a solution. Is writer's block something you deal with often?
Um, no, not really. I think no, I don't have a problem with writer's block. I think sometimes I struggle a little bit with new ideas, and I know I mentioned I have a lot of ideas, but not so much coming up with ideas, but kind of falling in love with an idea and going, oh yeah, that's because you're committing. If you're writing a novel, you're committing to at least 3 or 4 or 5, 6 months of writing and editing and rewriting and then marketing and selling and promoting and all that. So it's a big commitment. You want to really love the idea. So I think it's sometimes I don't fall in love with an idea, and that gets me a little anxious because I always want to work on the next project. So when that happens, I usually try and I kind of focus on a smaller project. So I'll like write a short story, or I'll just write something for fun, or whatever the case might be. But so I think I don't have a problem with writer's block. Once I'm writing, it's hard to keep me away from the desk. Especially when I'm in the middle of a big project. I work pretty feverishly 7 days a week. Uh, so so it's more of, I think, falling in love with the idea is something that I sometimes get snagged on.
That sounds suspiciously like the main character in Gothic. Where'd you get your desk, Philip? Just
Yeah. Yeah. Tyson, I think what happened with Tyson was that he kind of lost the mojo, like he was a younger man and he was writing these kind of horror novels, and then he got older, and as you get older, you change, your perspective changes a little bit, and also sometimes you want to write something that you feel is more substantial, or something that you feel has more of, quote unquote, longevity or whatever. So that's going to be your great American novel or whatever. And and I think with Tyson, he wanted to write something different, and the publisher didn't want different. They wanted the bestseller stuff. And so that's kind of what he ended up that's where he ended up really kind of hitting a wall. And um but then yeah, with the help of his new desk, he got his mojo back in spades.
Uh, well, it's lucky that you don't suffer from writer's block. I often find myself sometimes faltering, and it's not for a lack of ideas. It's like I have a story idea, and then I become intimidated by like, okay, I need to write this well,
Mhm.
and of course, you're not supposed to think that way. You're supposed to just get it down on paper because that's what the editing is for.
Right.
Um, is that anything you experience, or do you just like straight like Kool-Aid into it?
I am one of those guys who I write what's called a vomit draft. So I write fast. I write the first draft is written very fast, and of whether it be a story or whatever. Like I wrote the first draft of Boys in the Valley in 4 weeks, and then I spent like 3 months editing it, and I'm still editing it. A year plus later. Um, I'm one of those guys that gets it all out, and then I go back and I rewrite everything from top to bottom. I prefer that way because I like to know I like to see the whole picture before I start rewriting. I know there's some writers, Joe Lansdale famously, uh, and Paul Tremblay, I think, also does this. They'll write a certain amount of words, and then they will go back and they will edit all those words, and then they will close their laptop, and then do the same thing the next day. And then with the time when they finish the book or whatever it is, it's pretty much as it's going to be. There's only like light proofing to do. So there are writers who enjoy that working that way. I'm more like I said. I like to get it all out there, and then I go back and I rework stuff. Occasionally, I'll go back and do a little rewriting um, to sections if I finish something and I want to just kind of take another look at it. But for the most part, I just get it all out there, and then I go back and I start right at the top and I go through the whole thing again. And that's when I do a lot of the fleshing out. The more of the pretty phrasing comes in that second, round, and I try and add characterization or enhance a scene. So there's things that I do like that that all happen usually on the second or third go around.
Okay, this is a bit of a specific question that I was curious about. Not spoilery, but there is a character called Diana, and I think this is safe to say she's hunting for the desk. And I
Mhm.
wondered, like, did you name her for the Roman goddess of the hunt?
Oh, interesting. No, but
Oh,
that's an interesting through. Yeah, no, I did not, but I think but I'll say yeah, sure.
all
It's
right.
kind of no, the curtains are just blue, but yeah, no, but that's interesting. I've run into that before. I wrote I wrote a story called Surfer Girl, and in Surfer Girl, there's the main character is Adolf with an F, and um a friend of mine read the story, and they were like, "That was so smart that you called him Adolf." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" They're like, "Because it means wolf, and he does what he does in the story." And I was like, "I had no idea. I just thought it was a cool name." So yeah, so no, I think yeah, but sometimes that happens where you just get lucky.
Yeah, because so I really like that character. She was one of my favorite in the
Oh, thank you.
yeah. And I was like curious because of, how her character is. I was like, oh, it seems like it must be deliberate. But that's funny because that happens to me too when I write something and somebody reads really deep meaning in it, and I'm like, yeah, sure, that's what I meant.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that because that was a difficult her story was was complex, and her character is very complex. And it's also very foreign to me being, a dude. So I was kind of I really wanted to get her right and give her a lot of life. So I'm glad that it makes me happy to hear you say that you enjoyed her. Thank you.
And then again, no spoilers, but the ending left me wondering if there is going to be a sequel just because of um, you know, the way it was written. Is that so?
Well, it's one of those things where you never say never. Um, but I have no plans for it to be a sequel. No, I kind of think it is what it is. But you never know. You never know. I could sort of see, I'm sure there would be a world where I could see another iteration of the desk. But right now I don't have any idea. I don't have any plans for it. No, I have the next like 3 or 4 novels are kind of planned. So I'm gonna write those and then we'll see. Maybe I'll come back to it. I don't know. But no, the ending is pretty much the ending. It's yeah, I don't want to say any more than that.
That's
But yeah.
fair. Yeah, no saying anymore. Again, this is Gothic. It's coming out next year, but you can pre-order it now. I'll edit in a cover. Ooh. And the pre-order link is in the description of this video, so you should definitely grab a copy. I really enjoyed it. Let's talk about other projects quickly to wrap up the interview. What are you
Sure.
working on right now? I know you said you have several novels coming out.
Yeah, so I have a novel, right? Don't I have a novel called "Don't Let Them Get You Down" that's coming out from Zagava Press. I have a Child Alone with Strangers is coming out from Skyhorse Talos Press September 27th. That's a 600-page crime horror thriller, a lot of fun. And then Gothic next February, and then Boys in the Valley in July. And then I'm writing a novel. So right now I'm working on a screenplay. I'm adapting one of my own short stories for a feature film. So I'm working on that. And then once I finish that, I'm going to start writing the second book in of my Nightfire Orbit deal, because it is a 2-book deal. So they have the first book, and I'm going to start writing. And they bought the pitch for a second book, so I'm going to start writing that second book, and it's called Brothers, and that will be what I basically am doing for most of the winter. I think, and going into early next year, I'll be working on that once I finish the screenplay, which will probably take me about another month.
Well, congrats on the 2-book deal, though. That's exciting.
Yeah, it was great. I've never had to write a book that's already been bought. So, so it's a little intimidating and gives me a little bit of anxiety, because it's unlike when you just are writing for yourself or you don't really know if a book's going to sell or whatever. There's not quite as much pressure. So this is a situation where I'm feeling a little bit of pressure to make the book great, and so hopefully it will be. But yeah, but it was nice very nice of Tor Nightfire to make it a 2-book deal, uh, and Orbit UK, who's going to be distributing both books in the UK Commonwealth countries simultaneously with Tor Nightfire. So yeah, no pressure, but the
A
second
lot of
book
pressure.
the second book needs to be great because they've already paid for it and it's going to have a worldwide release. So that yeah, but I have a pretty good idea of how that book's gonna go. So I'm really just anxious to get started on it. But I have to
Can you
but
give us
yeah.
a little hint?
Yeah, I think well it's a it's set in this Civil War period um in the United States, and it's about these 3 brothers who go AWOL after a particularly horrific battle. Uh and they it's about them trying to get back home and avoid being caught. And while traveling home, they come upon a homestead of a stranger, um, and they end up staying there for a while. So that's kind of what the book is about.
All right. And
Yeah,
I also hear that you have a movie deal now.
yeah. So that's what I'm writing the screenplay for. Yeah. So there's a commercial director named Christopher Riggert who him and his and a producer Source Productions. They bought the rights to my story, Death, My Old Friend, which is the last story in my collection, Beneath the Pale Sky. And they hired me to write the screenplay for the story for the feature adaptation. So that's what I'm doing right now. So yeah, that was the Deadline article that came out yesterday. Was a really a nice surprise. I didn't know that was coming out. So I knew it was coming. I knew there was going to be an announcement. I didn't know it was going to be so much about me, which was great. Um, yeah, so I'm writing that now, and then once everybody signs off on that screenplay, I'll uh, I'll move on to doing the novel. And then I'm sure I'll be going back to the screenplay because I've written movies before. I wrote a movie for Lifetime Television. I wrote a movie for Disney. So um, typically, once the screenplay is done, they'll start attaching actors and doing all that pre-production stuff. And then once it actually goes into production, I'm sure I'll be back in the mix doing rewrites and stuff like that because you end up doing a lot of rewrites once you find the locations that you're going to shoot at, or once you hire the actors who are going to perform the different parts. A lot of things change. So there'll be a lot of like rewriting that I'm sure I'll have to come back on board for once whenever that happens down the line. Probably within the next couple of years, I would imagine.
Well, that's pretty exciting though. Congrats.
Yeah, it's cool. I've optioned a few stories now. This is the first time they've offered me the opportunity to write the screenplay for it. So I have a couple stories that have been sold to once to a studio, a major studio, and it's got a huge producer behind it and a big director. So that was exciting. That hasn't been announced yet, which is why I'm talking vaguely about it. And then I've sold a couple other stories that are being developed by different production companies. But yeah, I was really excited to. This is the first one that's actually been announced. So because the way they don't like things being announced until they're ready to go. Excuse me. But this one's done. So as far as like the deal and everything. So yeah, so I'm excited to write the screenplay for it, and hopefully it'll get funded and find a distributor and all that good stuff. But it's a long road for movies. You Paul Tremblay could speak to this better than anybody, and also other friends of mine like Ronald Malfi and guys like that who have option novels or option stories, and you see the Deadline or Variety talking about this director's attached and this producer's attached and this actor's attached, and then like you don't hear anything for a year, and then you see another article at the same novel. Now this director's attached, now this actor's attached, and in Paul's case it ended up working out because M. Night Shyamalan's doing the movie. But so yeah, it's a process and a long process, but hopefully at the end of the day it'll get made. But it's a crapshoot. I would very long odds that anything that ever gets optioned actually ends up getting made. So, but I think this one will because it's going to be a fairly low budget movie. The director is already attached. It's his first feature film, and the producer, I think has pretty much has the funding ready to go. So I just got to get the screenplay written and get everybody to sign off on it.
Awesome. And now the last question, and my audience would likely argue the most important one. What is your favorite food and why is it mac and cheese?
What is my favorite food and why is it mac and cheese? How can it not be mac and cheese? I mean,
Yeah.
that's really
You don't like
I
mac and cheese?
I'm not a mac and
Philip, we
cheese
can't be
guy.
friends anymore.
Well, here's the caveat to that. I like it. I like a baked casserole, like a fancy mac and cheese. You know what I mean? Where it's like got the different cheeses and it's all kind of baked into the thing. That I like. I'm not a big fan of the you pour it out of the box and you put the milk in and with the powder. I know, I know. I'm I'm an I'm an I think I've out aged it. I look when I was a kid, absolutely. My son loves it. I think I've become snobby in my old age. So, um, but I do like a steak.
Steak.
I'm
Good
a big
old meat and potatoes.
I'm a big steak guy. Yeah, I love a good steak.
Do you have
So
a favorite type of steak then? Are you a filet guy, T-bone, ribeye?
um I'm not a big I don't like eating things off the bone. I don't eat chicken off the bone. I don't I don't know, there's something about it that really doesn't appeal to me. But I eat ribs, so go figure. But I don't eat, but I no, I think I just like your standard like New York strip. I mean, I'll eat anything, but I had, when I'm celebrating something, we go out and get a nice steak at a nice place, and it's always a very happy moment for me. I'm also a huge sushi fan. So those are my two like celebratory meals, steak or sushi. Those are my go-tos. I ate a lot of sushi.
Perfect. Well,
There
thank
you
you
go.
again for taking the time to interview with me.
Of course.
And again, Gothic is coming out next year, but pre-orders are live now. The link is down below. You can also find Philip on Twitter, Instagram, or his website. All the links again are below. And again, thank you for taking the time.
Of course. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay, bye.
Bye.